Hey everyone, it's Sunday, April 12th, and it's shop update time. And I think we're going to talk about this, this, and this, and this, and this. Not this thing, though. First, that monitor stand that I hacked apart last week. Funny thing is, now that it's on my desk, you can't even see where I patched it because the base of the monitor covers it, and of course that strip that I put along the front covers it too. So, looks great, works great, so probably going to leave it as is. So I just released a kitchen update video on Thursday. Not much to say about that. You know, that was an update video itself, so it wasn't a new project, but a lot of people said some nice things about the kitchen, and like everybody else, I can't believe it's been a year already either. So yeah, I was right in the middle of these John Heisz clamps on my last update video, and in the meantime I finally got them finished, but I posted these pictures on Instagram, and I already had somebody saying, you know, tell me how they're better, or give me a review or something, and I just had to laugh because I'm like, I just finished them, you know, give me a chance to try them out. They are light. They are really, really light. You compare them, you know, I'm going to get the scale. Okay, here's the kitchen scale. Here is a similarly sized parallel clamp. 2172 grams, almost 2200 grams. This is made out of solid ash, 870 grams. Similar sized parallel clamp and 2.5 times the weight, but what counts is, does it do the job? That'll be the next thing I talk about, because it's like, yeah, I needed to give these something to do, and so I did a little shop cleanup and I made a bunch of cutting board blanks, and I'll show that next. Okay. First, the build. Let me finish talking about the build, because yeah, it gave me some headaches doing the build, and mostly my own fault, because like I said to John in email, I just tried to turn off my brain and follow the instructions, which doesn't work. You have to work with the plan package and the article on his website and the video. They all have something to contribute, and I mean, I've said that in my own plans when I sell them. I write it prominently in the plan several times. You know, I might even provide dimensions, but you got to take your dimensions off the project as you build it, because things might vary, and that's what happened here, is things varied. So just for fun, let me take this apart and tell you about all the places I messed up as I was building this project. Maybe that'll help somebody else. First, I made these walnut wedges, and I made this 10 degree like it's said in the plan, and I tried putting things together and it just wasn't fitting. If you look at the head, the wedge is supposed to fit through the head a bit, and it wasn't fitting through the head properly, so yeah, it's hard to see now, but down in here I had to make this block a little bit smaller, because you just have to fit this to your bar and to the head. And then I put it together and it still wasn't working. And I discovered that my angles were off. Somehow this, let's see, in the part where the handle goes through, let's get this into the view. This block here, this is angled. So on this side, it's a certain length. And on this side, as you can see, I think this is longer. So there's a slope in here. And the wedge has to match that. So I had to make some new wedges, and this time I just took the measurement from the project and forgot about 10 degrees. I think this is actually 14.5, 15 degrees what I ended up building. I was kind of sad because these were walnut, and I like the idea of walnut. These are cherry, my handles are cherry, everything else is ash. And then I got it built and everything looked good, and I put it together. And I got a first piece of wood, and I'm clamping it on there, and I'll throw up a picture here. So see how this is nice and parallel? That's what it's supposed to be. The first time I did this, it was way out of parallel, and it took me a while to figure out what was going on. And the problem was this block back here. This block out back here, like this mechanism tips up against the bottom of the bar here, and I had, again, the block I had here was too big, so that it was just fitting at an angle. I needed to trim this. I needed to trim this block smaller, as you can, I think you can see here that it's shorter than here. I had to cut like almost a 1/4 inch off this block to allow it to fit properly. And the last thing I messed up is putting it together. If you will look in here, you'll see that little split above, and you see the split below the threaded rod. I forgot to put this piece of wood in place before I mashed the nut that goes on the end of this threaded rod, and once that nut is mashed, there's no getting it off, so I had to cut this piece in half to fit it around. Long story short, built these for fun, had a lot of hiccups along the way, which are pretty much all my fault. So, how do the clamps work? Let's talk about that. Short answer, they work fine, but of course they have their own way of wedging and clamping, so you have to learn a different way of handling them. So I know someone was going to ask me my thoughts on it. In fact, I've already had people asking me on Instagram for a review. So like I said, I thought I'd put together some cutting board blanks. It's always handy to have a couple, and it helps me clean up the shop. So I gathered my wood together and I sorted out my different species. I really like mixing colors, and so I always like to make sure I have some walnut or some padauk or something. So I made up one cutting board blank, made up another cutting board blank, and I made up a third cutting board blank, which gave me some problems, and I tried adjusting it, and in the end I ended up turning those into Trivets. But let me show you the clamp in action. You have to train your hands to use this clamp for moving things along. It takes a while to get into that. And then in comparison, pull out one of my old standbys. And a new clamp is this Pony Jorgensen. I got a couple of these sent to me about a month ago. And it clamps, you know, this one clamps, this one clamps, this one clamps. They all have their little quirks. First time I used this, I have to admit, I didn't feel like I could really crank it down as hard as I cranked the metal ones. And then I caught myself and I'm like, well, I don't actually know how much it needs to be cranked down. And when I was moving on, I was using it a few more times with some of the other cutting board blanks, and yeah, it seems to work fine. When you loosen it, this wedge, if that becomes jammed, you just have to give the handle here a pop, and you might need to bang it on something a little bit. Really, ask me in a few months. I mostly made them for fun, and the reality is, when I was mixing these clamps together, I realized that it's having a lot of the same clamp is actually really nice, because often when you clamp something with the parallel clamps, I will stand them up. And if you have identical clamps, they're all going to be the same on the bottom. Well, you know, this one has a head that's a certain thickness, this one has a head that's a certain thickness, this one has a head that's a certain thickness. So having them all the same, it's just one little less headache when you're clamping things up. So yeah, these Trivets, just for a closer look, this is the same style of thing as the last ones I made, where I ripped these panels down to roughly 1/4 inch thick, and then I put them together at right angles, which sort of turns it into a plywood. This is one of the ones that I've made recently. So this is about, yeah, this is about 6 inches square, which I find a good size. It's big enough to fit under a pot, small enough to stick on the shelf. These are like 9 by 9, which I think is too big, but if I were to cut it down in size, I would lose this strip of walnut, which I don't know, I think it might be less interesting. So I'm just going to stick these on a shelf and sit on it for a few months. So yeah, I'm just going to stick these on the shelf. I have another cutting board blank up here that I made a little while ago. I find cutting boards are great gifts to sort of have on hand, so that's what these two. I glue them up, I plane them down roughly, and then I just sort of stick them up on a shelf until the time comes when I need a wedding present or a donation for somebody. Then I'll take it down and finish it up. And at that point, I'll decide if I want to trim down the trivet or leave it as is. We'll see. So since I had 2 more clamps, I needed to find a place to put them. So I sort of MacGyvered something here at the end of my clamp rack. Made a little place where I can tuck these in. And it's temporary. As I mentioned, these 2 Jorgensens are also new. I got a couple of them sent to me a month or so ago. And as I was looking at my clamp rack, I noticed my spot down here where the place where I have all the quick grips. So my clamp rack is basically a board with a bunch of slots cut into it, and I fit my parallel clamps in there. But over here, it snapped a while ago, a couple of pieces, and then another one snapped, and I've just been working around it. But as I was trying to fit in the new clamps, I was like, I think I should take this down and fix it. It's instead of a piece of solid wood, it probably should be plywood, because the problem here is this is solid wood. There's not much strength here, so it just snapped along the grain. So since I want to rebuild this section, it just made me think about clamp racks, and I wondered about rebuilding all of it, because the way I've always done it is I have the slot and I fit the clamp in the slot, and then I slide it up and give it a little twist to clamp it in place. That does, it's not a big deal. You just loosen it and pop it out. But it is an extra step, and so when I put the Jorgensens in here, the clamp head is a little bit different, and I put them on top. I've wondered about remaking the whole thing so that all of the clamps just sit on top. I don't know. Did you see what happened there? I just picked one up and the head slid down on me. So, what way do you think is better? If I were to redo it, I would need to add a little lip on the front, because you don't want it just sliding off. So I need a little lip up front to hold it. How do you guys do your parallel clamps? Do you clamp them? Do you clamp them into position, or do you rest them into position? I kind of like having them slotted straight in, as opposed to if you turn them sideways and stack up. I don't know. You could do that. I guess I could just have a dowel there, and I could hang a couple on a dowel, sort of like that. You could hang it on a dowel, but then they don't hang straight. And as you see, you can hang them horizontally. I've done that with the really long ones. I just put them up near the ceiling, but I think that takes up more space. I think the vertical approach is still the best. Probably think about it for a day or two. Is there a better way to hang the quick grips? I don't know. So I think that's about it for this update. As always, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.